Hi, I'm Ralph Demetrius. I'm one of the astrologers for the Planetary Calendar, and this is one of our portraits. And this portrait actually came from our companion book. This is the Planetary Calendar Astrology companion book, Moving Beyond Observation into Action. For the book, we did a whole chapter on what's called the visible and the invisible planets. And we used various people as examples of this. And one of the people we used was Pope Francis. And it's a fascinating chart, which is not surprising. You would think that the head of the Catholic Church, the first American to become the head of the Catholic Church, would be a pretty unusual guy. But when you look at his chart, you really see how special he is, but also how misunderstood he was. The first thing you notice is that his sun is in Sagittarius, a great position for a churchman because the Sagittarians love to pontificate. They love to preach, but they're also very much people. His sun is at 25 degrees Sagittarius. Now, that may not be significant, but for the fact that that is the point of the galactic center, the center of our galaxy that we rotate around. And whenever people have planets at that point, it creates, maybe you might call a great sense of gravity. They say it's an esoteric point. I'm not really sure what they mean by that, the astrologers who have said that, but I think it's just a point of great power, great depth, great gravity might be another way to say it. And, you expect a great churchman to have a sense of gravitas. It's also conjunct his north node. Well, the north node is about your karmic direction. So when the sun is conjunct your north node, it means you will really actively work on what you might call your dharmic path, of becoming a more complete person. It's also conjunct loosely Pallas Athena. Pallas Athena is the asteroid which is about being a champion for the weak, right? And the whole thing is in the sixth house. The sixth house is the house of the servant, which is interesting. This is a person who is very much geared towards being a teacher, but in the house of the servant. Now, where the chart is really interesting is that the way in which we see people is through their rising sign. It's that point to the east where the sun would rise in our charts. The sign there has a lot to do with how people perceive us. And he has Cancer rising, 10 degrees Cancer rising. So he's seen as a nurturing person. Cancer is a nurturing sign. What's really interesting is that there are no major visible planets near the rising. But there are a great number of what we call these invisible planets. These are bodies that can't be seen without a telescope. It includes Pluto, the smallest of the planet, but small but mighty, you might say, in Cancer. So there's a great deal of drive there. It's conjunct Vesta, which means having a great sense of mission. Also, because Pluto is one of the outer planets, it takes 240 years to go through its cycle. People with Pluto rising tend to have a very global view. They tend to like to look at the long term. They also tend to be very perceptive. But right at the rising, at 10 degrees Cancer, is the asteroid Hygeia, which is a very large asteroid. It's traditionally seen as being related to health, as in hygiene. But it's very much an earth goddess, Venus. It's about, being in touch with your true self, your earthy self, your physical body. Well, right above the horizon is Chiron, the planet of, the planetoid is actually a captured comet, which is a healing planet, and that's in Gemini. So you have this at the beginning of his chart, all these components that relate to having a mission and healing. And yet, other people don't perceive it. And that's the thing about these invisible planets. If they can't be seen without a telescope, people miss that about you. If you're one of these people who have these invisible planets rising, you may oftentimes feel misunderstood. People don't see who I am, even though it's very evident to me. Beyond that, the next planet is Neptune. Oh my gosh, this is another one of the planets that can't be seen. That's in the third house. That's in Virgo. And Virgo is the planet, once again, of the servant. Neptune is the planet of the spiritual self. And so, having that as the next visible planet, once again, he approaches his life with a very strong sense of being a spiritual servant that people, once again, miss. The first visible planet that you see is Mars and Libra in the fourth house. Mars and Libra is what's called the detriment position. It's the sign opposite Aries. And the reason it's called the detriment is that it's an introvert position. This is someone who has a very strong sense of justice. And they will physically place themselves in the way of injustice if it matters to them. And so this was the child who, in the playground, would be the peacemaker. This is the child who, if he saw something unjust, he would stand there and stop it because he saw it was as unfair. It's not a aggressive position, it's a responsive position. So it's a tremendous position for making connections with people. So here you have the sun in the sixth house, a person who truly wants to serve. Mars in the fourth house, a house that's all about nurturing and finding common ground with other people. And then above the horizon, remember all this is below the horizon, above the horizon you have the moon conjunct Venus, both in Aquarius. This is the position of the shepherd. The moon in Aquarius likes to have a flock. And the thing was, he was always what is known as a pastoral priest. He was a person who liked having a congregation. He wasn't, so many of the popes were people who were administrators. He didn't want to do that. He liked being with people. He wanted to be engaged. And that's something that comes with Sagittarius. The Sagittarians it's a mutable sign. They like to engage with people. But that moon in Aquarius, that likes to have a flock. And it's in the eighth house. So it's about really managing that flock effectively. He was a real force in his community. High above the head was Saturn in Pisces. This is about having ambitions in the spiritual world. In the eighth house, the ninth house, the house of scholarship. And he was a tremendously well-educated man, in fact, a scientist. And oftentimes it's interesting how many times Pisces attracts people to science, especially biology. Kind of interesting factor. And then at the midheaven's in the 11th house. This is the position, once again, of the person who likes working with a community. He has it in Taurus, right, which is about patience. It's about the earth. But Uranus is conjunct the midheaven. And this is interesting because it means that in terms of his position in society, he's going to be seen as unusual, but very exciting. He's not always visible. A lot of his work was done behind the scenes, and yet he would come to attention now and then. Things would come up, and sometimes there would be controversy because it's Uranus, and Uranus can't resist controversy for some reason. Uranus up at the midheaven in Taurus, which goes back to that Venus in Aquarius in the eighth house. So the controversy was always about how he was managing his flock. But the thing about Aquarius is that with Aquarius, it's not personal. Aquarius is, I don't want to say it's the most impersonal sign, it's the most transpersonal sign. It's the sign that's most about what's good for me and my community. What's good for my community is good for me. That line between myself and my community blurs real easily. And that moon in Aquarius is like that. It's funny that the moon in Aquarius is actually a very good position for a person who's going to work in the church because it's not a passionate position. The thing that's interesting about this is that this is a very emotional chart in some ways with that Cancer rising, but it's not a passionate position, but it is a very scholarly position. He's a very, very much the scholar. So this position of this person who has great gravitas, has a deep desire to be a servant to others, who truly wants to pursue their dharmic path and be the best person they can be, a person who naturally nurtures and heals others, someone who is a natural born peacemaker, who will, pour oil on the water, and yet at the peak of their career can't help but want to disrupt things. And since he's been the Pope, he has definitely caused some uproar by looking at new ideas about how the church could go forward. Which, if you're going to put an American, a South American or North American there, you're going to have to figure that's going to happen, because the Americas are an innovative place. The final point that's very interesting is it's his Jupiter. His Jupiter is in the 7th house in Capricorn. It's in a conjunction with Ceres, the largest of the asteroids, the Shepherd asteroid. So you have Jupiter, the biggest of the planets, conjunct the Shepherd in Capricorn, and conjunct Mercury, also in Capricorn. So this is, when he spoke, Mercury and Capricorn, they speak very seriously. I remember when I was studying Spanish many years ago, and I would watch television. The one person I could always understand was whenever they had a character playing a priest, because the priests would always speak very slowly and clearly, and it was a treat for me learning the language. And he is that kind of person. He naturally speaks with that kind of, as I have said, gravitas, with that sense of serious self. His core self is really quite joyful, that Sagittarius nature. The Cancer rising is very nurturing and loving, but he comes across as very serious, which he's been in many, many serious roles. The Jupiter being there combines that. Jupiter in Capricorn is a bit of an oxymoron, because Jupiter is about expansion, Capricorn's about constriction. Jupiter in Capricorn is actually called the fall position for Jupiter. It's opposite the exalted position. It's the position of the confidant. And see how this reflects, once again, the position of the confidant. It's the person that people turn to. And it works with that Mars in Libra. People can go to them with their confidences. He probably was a wonderful confessor, because he really made a great confidant, because he could approach serious subjects and yet bring a warmth to it, bring a humanity to it, bring optimism to it, and be fair. So he really is quite a remarkable person. But it's interesting that he never was assigned to Rome. When he was chosen as from being a cardinal to becoming a pope, he was not a cardinal working in Rome, as so many of the previous popes have been. He was never grabbed and moved there. He was in Argentina, taking a bus to work, living in his apartment, and then moved to Rome and got himself an apartment and didn't want to live in the papal palace, because he likes being a person of the people. He likes being a shepherd. So that's my little insight into Pope Francis. Like I said, some of the analysis is there in the Planetary Calendar Astrology companion book that goes with the calendar, and we hope it's interesting to you. And visit planetarycalendar.com or spaceandtime.com to find more of our episodes. And on Fridays, we do our forecast for the coming week. Enjoy and be well. Hi, welcome to Planetary Calendar's Astro Portraits. I'm Ralph Demetrius, one of the astrologers. The person we're looking at today is very famous. Fred Rogers, a.k.a. Mr. Rogers, a.k.a. Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, who was on television for many years and was a tremendously sophisticated thinker about how we should treat children and how children experience the world. And people oftentimes underestimate how important he was among the thinkers of the day in changing how we raise children. Up until that point, there was a tendency to treat children kind of like little, nebulous animals, and those early parts of life didn't really matter. It was later on that they were shaped, and Fred Rogers and other people like him realized, no, those early years are primary. And of course, research since then has shown that we learn a tremendous amount of what we're going to know in our entire lives in those first 3 or 4 years. Who is he? What's his chart about? This is an interesting chart astrologically because he has what's called a stellium, a collection of planets in the same sign in Pisces, the sign of the spiritual, the sign of the sensitive, the sign of the deep thinker. He has Mercury, Venus, the asteroid Vesta, that was actually a fifth one, the moon and the sun in Pisces. What's interesting is the Mercury and the Venus in Pisces are conjunct, same degree. The Vesta is 1 degree away at 3. Vesta, close to a planet, gives that planet a strong sense of mission. Venus in Pisces is what's called the exalted position. It is a tremendously compassionate position that relates tremendously well to others, especially to people in a Jupiter style. Remember that Pisces is ruled by Jupiter. It's the feminine side of Jupiter. So that Venus place there is very powerful. The fact that the Vesta is there, this was a mission to him, expressing compassion, especially through speech. And remember, Pisces is also illusion. Through make-believe, through puppets, was for him a mission. We know his rising. He was actually born March 20th, 1928 at 8:20 a.m. in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, famous, of course, for its beer. At the 29th degree in 41 minutes of Pisces, the very last degree. People oftentimes say, oh, well, all the energy is going into the next sign. Actually, from what we've seen over the years and other astrologers have seen, when you're in the last degree of a sign, it makes it more powerful. It's like you're standing on the threshold and all the energy is right there. It's all inside the person. And so this is like a super Pisces energy. What's interesting is that right outside of that at 3 degrees Aries is Uranus. So Uranus is very close to the sun in Aries, a very, very energetic sign, which is also the sign of his Jupiter. His Jupiter is at 12 degrees Aries. Jupiter in Aries is a sign that loves to be with people. It likes to engage people. It's kind of fearless about that. It likes to be with people, it likes to engage, it likes to be the first person in the room. And this is part of his quality. Jupiter in Aries also tends to like children. It likes understanding that new life. It tends to be fascinated with babies and young children. And Uranus conjunct the sun is one of the reasons why he dealt so well with technology. Uranus is all about technology. He has Taurus rising. Taurus rising, among other things, gives a very nice voice. And his voice was so mellow and so gentle. It's Venus ruled, which means it went back to that exalted Venus in Pisces. So you see this beautiful connection between the artistry of Taurus rising. Remember, he was a musician and a singer and a tremendous piano player. I mean, played classical music. Very, very talented person, very well trained. Very talented in his voice. It was part of his work as a puppeteer. His rising goes back to that Venus and Mercury in Pisces now, and it's supercharged by the Jupiter and the Uranus in Aries. So he brings a lot of energy to this. And what's beautiful about this is that the Jupiter and the Uranus are in the 12th house along with the part of fortune. The 12th house is the sign of the studio. It's oftentimes seen as a sign of the hospital or sickness or prison because it's restricted. That's one way to look at it, I guess, in a fairly difficult part of life. But it's also the studio. It's the haven. And he liked being on the studio floor. He liked being in that protected environment and having a sun in the 11th house. He liked the expansiveness of it, the technology. And also being in the 11th house, it shows an ability to reach out to a large audience. And it's funny because these several houses, the 11th house, the 12th house, the first house, that's really where so much of his chart takes place. Interestingly, he has Mars highly elevated in Aquarius. Once again, technology, Mars in Aquarius, conjunct Ceres, the largest of the asteroids, in the shepherd. And in some ways, he was like that shepherd. He was the shepherd of the community. He did so many things that really affect his community. They many times credit him with saving the financing for PBS. his presentation on the congressional floor saved it because of how important this was. He expressed how important this was. He was the shepherd. He had the midheaven in Capricorn, with Pallas up at the highly elevated as well. Pallas has technical skills in Aquarius. He understood how to use technology well. The beautiful part of this chart is that stellium in Pisces, because it shows his compassion. It shows his sensitivity. It shows his sense of mission through that Vesta, that this mattered to him. Well, he was on the air, I think, for 38 years. You don't do that without a strong sense of mission. I mean, putting on that sweater every day and changing those shoes every day. He did very similar shows. But he worked with so many children and so many children in distress, and he was so accessible to people. That Jupiter in Aries, that Uranus in Aries in the 12th house, it shows the energy he brought to it. It also shows that when he was in the studio, he was a force to be reckoned with. And they always said that when he was working in the studio with his team, he would run things. I mean, they've kind of had to follow him around because he was a little bit impetuous. People would walk in the studio, he'd drop everything to walk over to them, practically in the middle of a scene. Our children would come and he'd stop everything to go tend to them. It mattered to him. But it all came through this beautiful filter of this Taurus rising, that beautiful voice, this love of music, this calm nature that he expressed, a tremendous amount of spirituality, a great love of people, expressed gracefully through that Taurus rising. So that Fred Rogers. So